Global, sparking innovative thoughts. We're going to be talking with Brett King, the author of The Rise of Technosocialism and the founder of Movin. And of course, we have in this group, we have Kun Paul, Kun Paul Ak, who is the advisor of Gobi Partners, and Kun Nichapat, is that right? Thailand coverage at Open Space Ventures, and Kun Mimi, the co-founder and CEO of Techsauce Media. And I am Chawarat Yongjiranonor. I'm the global content editor.
Actually, Brett is our guest speaker before at Techsauce Global Summit event in 2017. So this is our second time that we have chance to interview Brett King. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
No, be on the session.
Yeah, no, if I could, I just want to sort of briefly describe the kind of the origin story of this tonight's conversation, because Mimi had asked if Brett and I would join her in a room, a Techsauce room on Clubhouse, and I think Brett and I, and we love chatting, and we had a great lunch with Nietzsche, as well as Kit from Rise and Sam from Krung Si. And so I think what we want to do is, rather than make it kind of a really formal interview style panel, a lot of times when I sit down with Brett over drinks or dinner, we just start riffing on different books we've read, cool technologies that are coming out. We start imagining what some of these technologies will be like in the far future, and it just really leads to some interesting discussions. And I think the last time we did this, Nietzsche was with us, and some other Thai folks, and I think the ideas were just sort of bouncing around, and we figured, what if we did this in a Clubhouse room? And I think what we wanted to do was not just create that kind of environment, but we wanted to make it a little bit more inclusive, because we do understand that a lot of the folks in the Thai ecosystem may not be completely comfortable with English, and Brett and I, sometimes we get excited and we talk fast, but there's always some really great ideas that I think we wanted to highlight, which is why we're not doing a pure translation format, but we'll sort of chat for a while, we'll bounce ideas around, and then we'll take a break every 7-8 minutes. And then one of our lovely Thais on the stage will kind of just summarize in Thai for our Thai language speakers, just some of the highlight top level ideas that we're sort of bouncing around, so that at least everyone can try to be as inspired as the rest of us. And so actually, just to kind of get things rolling, and I kind of want everyone on the stage to comment on this, because one of the things that Brett and I always do is, because we're both futurists and we're like sci-fi geeks, we love to talk about movies that we like, and we like to try and imagine what are the cool technologies in movies that could kind of become real life. And for a great example, I know almost everyone in this room has watched the Avengers, and so we talk about how long will it take to have Iron Man style armor? When can we have Quinjets? When are we going to get these types of technologies? So what I would love is to just ask everyone on the stage, is there some sort of movie that you love or that you saw where you say, that is a piece of technology that I want to see in my lifetime?
For me, it's not a movie necessarily, it's a book. Or a series of books, and that is the Culture series by Ian Banks. And if you know Elon, he's a big fan of Ian Banks and sort of the vision he has of the future. And that is where, technology has sort of been integrated into humanity to get humanity to its optimal. So that means, you can live forever, you don't get sick, you've got incredible intelligence because of neural implants, plus you get all of those other things like the Iron Man suit, but, sort of basically built into your exoskeleton or whatever you want to call it, including like neural lace and neural chips and things like that can back up your consciousness. So for me, that's probably optimal humanity, based on, and it will be sometime, in the 22nd century, I think, when we'll get there. Obviously, there's some tech that we can talk about now, like nano robots and things like that get depicted in sci-fi, which would be pretty cool to have in the latter part of this century. But 22nd century, it takes it to a whole new level.
Michapat, do you have any thoughts? You look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, I am about to talk about a book as well, right? So for me, it's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because for me, I believe in effective communication, right? And I think just rightly the way we have the clubhouse session today, right? We still have to do the bilingual sort of session, right? But if we could have bubblefish, the way it said in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you don't need a translator. You would understand each other. Everyone, though speaking in that languages, but can understand each other. So for me, we kind of getting there, but still far away for the real-time translator. But if you ask me what are the tech that I am excited about, I would love to see that.
I want to explain to everyone in the room that may not have read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because it is a classic science fiction book, and it was actually written in 1977, but it influenced an entire generation of geeks and nerds, actually including Elon Musk. In the biography of Elon Musk, he basically said that The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he read it when he was 15, and it shaped his entire thinking in adulthood. And one of the little kind of throwaway pieces of technology, because it's a space adventure, and to explain how Earthlings can understand different aliens, they talk about this alien fish called a babblefish that you stick in your ear. And when it hears alien languages, it eats the sound waves and then it poops out other sound waves in your native language. It's silly, but it basically is kind of a real-time translation device. And actually Google is working on a wearable called under the project name Project Babblefish, because they want to do real-time audio translation. So, I think about, if we fast forward,
we're getting pretty close to that.
We're getting close. So imagine if you fast forward 20 years and you have automatic real-time translation in any language. Do you need to even study a foreign language in school?
Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Jack Ma actually talks about this when he talks about the future of education. He says we won't need to learn other languages because we'll have instant translation. But he said you lose something if when you don't learn a new language, you miss aspects of the culture and the richness of that. So, but fortunately, as technology improves, we'll have more time to do things like learning languages. So, we'll be able to use the tech when we can't, but I still think there's a richness to learning the languages.
I'm sorry. I had to jump in.
No,
Hello,
please,
everyone.
please.
Brett, actually,
please.
I spoke to you at the summit. We were
I remember.
Talking, through Zoom. And this is interesting because I am an educator. I teach English. So I am like bilingual. So I kind of understand how, there's differences, there's nuances when you talk about translation. You can't simply just like Google Translate. I mean, we will get very accurate translation, but there are certain concepts in cultures that really can't be translated. There are certain things like, for example, in Thai language where you say, "Nam chai, kreng chai," that's kind of like a cultural aspect where it's not really seen in other countries where you think of the other person. Have you heard of this, Brett? The Thai word. I know you're in Thailand, right?
I am, but I haven't heard of that concept.
Yeah. Well,
but there's a lot of idioms,
that
don't translate well when you're trying to, like Chinese idioms and things like that, that you'd have like no way, it'd be difficult to translate,
Yeah.
anyway, I won't go into examples.
Because you're like talking about culture as well, which is interesting. It's interesting. I think there's a Disney film coming out. Actually, it's on in the movies right now. You guys are into sci-fi. I'm into animation. Disney just came out with an animation. I think it's called Raya.
Raya and the Last Dragon.
Yes, Raya and the Last Dragon. And that is like a bunch of writers got together and they were writing, from the influences of Southeast Asian countries. So they were trying their best to like fuse everything together in one film. So, I mean, I haven't watched it yet, but I think it's interesting how we as humans will evolve, as not only just like kept in by our own borders. I mean, it's interesting if you do have that translation accuracy continuing on, and of course the art of learning languages, but it's going to be interesting to see how we evolve and understand each other more. Yeah,
well, it's interesting because the movie itself, aside from being kind of a Disney animated film, I think the message behind it is supposed to be kind of, there's a lot of discussion about countries working together, sustainability and climate, probably a lot of gender equality. So a lot of the key issues that I think we're struggling with today, and actually probably sort of gets into Brett's new book as well. So I think the movie is very timely.
Right, guys. Just very conscious of time, right? We are 15 minutes into the session, and then now, we want to discuss about the future tech in Thailand, right? So now the question is that, once again, the movies that you guys have seen, what are the cool tech that you wish we will have that, right? I mean, the one that I share, the bubble fish. I know that right now the tech is still not there, but we are talking about what if we have that, right? Let's if you guys don't mind, let's go back to that. I'm not sure, Kun Pupe, would you like to share the tech in the movie that you like, that you wish that we're gonna have in the next century?
Oh, I don't know, because honestly, I'm kind of living in the moment right now.
Awesome. So we don't yeah. So maybe we give you maybe a few more moments.
Oh,
and then
I could just say my last thing about this whole situation. I think we're living in an exciting time. I think we've talked about it in various talks. I've talked to Brett about it. How COVID-19 has really triggered that speed into accelerating a lot of things that we're seeing in movies. I mean, just this morning I was reading news about how Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook was saying, in the future we could teleport by using smart glasses, by using augmented reality. So it's exciting. I think that what's so cool is that it's going to happen soon. A lot of things that we haven't seen in the past. Kunmimi, do you want to say something?
Yes, I would like to ask Brett about the technology for the aging society, because of it is possible for us in the next century whether we can live longer, maybe beyond 130 years old or something like that.
Absolutely. So the most, we're obviously working on longevity right now. We have a number of technologies that certainly by the 22nd century will be available to us for longevity. The major thing right now is we're obviously trying to engineer cellular reproduction, senescence, and so forth to improve. So there's a number of techniques for this. One is ensuring that our telomeres, that the little connections at the end of our DNA strands don't fray, and this introduces replication error for cell reproduction. A lot of this is being studied right now, boosting the immune system and so forth. But of course, in the 22nd century, we'll also have transhumanism. Will be integrating technology and cybernetics and so forth into the body. And so one of the big concerns is that, in the 22nd century, we could have two classes of humans. We could have humans that have been enhanced or augmented to the point where they're no longer, humans in the classical sense. And, you could have natural humans, and this could be people may choose to live completely naturally with minimal enhancements to themselves, just biological treatments rather than cybernetics. But others, humanity as a whole is going to have to probably, enhance ourselves and augment ourselves to compete with artificial intelligence in some respects as well. So, having said that,
actually, can I comment on that, Brett?
Yeah,
Because I'd
go
love
ahead,
to talk about a book. But actually, first, do we want to do kind of just a quick 1 to 2 minute summary of some of the ideas we're talking to for the benefit of our Thai speakers?
Brett, I wanted to ask this. I want to slip this question in because you're saying that we'll find a way to extend our lives, right? What about the population, though? How did we control the population of our
well,
world?
you send who you don't want to Mars with Elon, I guess. I don't know. No,
Okay, I send my husband.
Yeah.
I'll miss you.
Paul and I are both going to Mars, I think. No, the reality is population increase was a concern historically, but these days, the world is going to reach a peak of about 11 billion people in the 2070s, and then population is actually going to start contracting, because as we get more affluent around the world, and people get more wealth, they tend to have less children. And so as developing economies become more developed by technologies like the internet, we're going to see birth rates shrink. There's many countries around the world already today that have negative birth rates, Italy, Japan, Spain, etc. And so it's actually a problem. We may not be producing enough babies to increase the human race in the way we have previously. So with longevity, the other issue is you have an aging population. And so how do you care for an aging population when you don't have a lot of babies being born? And we're going to use robotic technology and things like that to attempt to do that. But one of the big challenges facing humanity in the 22nd century is having babies.
It's interesting that you talk about, how to deal with aging society. And I guess I was going to talk about a different movie, but actually one movie that came to mind when you were talking about that was the Robin Williams movie, Bicentennial Man. And if anyone has,
that's a good example.
And it's basically, for those that are not familiar with it, it wasn't a really popular movie, but I actually really enjoyed it. Robin Williams actually plays a synthetic robot that gains consciousness, and it's about his quest to become more human over time. And along the way, I mean, his character actually develops, biological synthetic implants that will basically extend life. So, humans will basically have kind of, these biomechanical hearts and organs. And it raises a lot of questions of at what point do humans have so many of these implants that they are more machine than human? And does that make them, machine? And I think as Robin Williams' character was basically implanting these same organs in his own body, and he starts to achieve kind of the same mix between the types of organs that humans were implanting. Does he achieve humanity? Because now it's no longer 100% biological and 100%, machine. And so, if you look at some of these technologies, you're talking about robotics. I thought one of the really interesting features from the Avengers movies is, if everyone remembers War Machine, Tony Stark's friend, who actually was crippled in one of the movies. He sustained a spinal injury, and he has to use that robotic tech so that he can walk. So this is someone who actually is physically disabled, but is mobile. And these types of technologies are now coming up.
I was just going to say, the word disability will have disappeared by the 22nd century.
Yeah, because it will all be synthetic, will be augmented. But there's actually these robotic exoskeletons that are being tested in Japan that will allow elderly Japanese to still continue to do manual labor, lift boxes, do gardening, do sort of construction work, because these exoskeletons will sort of augment their physical, their aging muscles. And so some of this future tech is now starting to, to Chowrat's point, it start to accelerate. So everything that I would have thought would have probably taken 50 years is now actually sort of popping up either now or in the next 5 to 10.
I have a question, because as a female, I don't know. I feel that, when I can't get my mind off that. I feel like some women or some people, they're born and they do want to have children. They do want to have, they do want to create life, right? But I feel like, okay, then are you saying there will be a minority of people who are going to be reproducing, while you have others who are maybe at different levels of their lives, or I don't know.
Well, no, that's such an interesting question, because it gets back to, I think, some of the earlier points when we're talking about learning languages. I mean, if you think about a lot of the stuff that humans did for so long, it's because they needed to. I think for thousands of years, humans had babies just to kind of propagate the race. It wasn't because they loved having babies. It's because the species needs to survive. And if you think about sort of the most underdeveloped places in the world, these families have multiple kids because the mortality of their children under the age of 5 is quite high. So many children die before they reach the age of 5. So having 7, 8, 12 kids is a hedge. It's like you have 12 kids and you hope that 3 survive. And things like cooking, it used to be something that families had to do every day to survive, but now cooking is now seen as a hobby. It's you do it for art, for personal satisfaction. I think
there's one factor that might change all of this, though, which is we won't have to work in the future the way we do today. Work is going to dramatically change as a function of society, and we're going to have things like universal basic income and so forth. And so, as Paul rightly pointed out, today for many people, the decision to have children is an economic one. And now when you have global universal basic income, which I would expect we would have in the 22nd century, or basically housing, food, education, healthcare, etc., will be just integrated into society and free. When you have that, then the economic factors around having a child, disappear, and then you make a decision of whether you want to have a child purely for bringing an intelligence or a life into the world and having that experience. And so I do think that what we will reframe the issue of having children in the future.
I think that's true. I think actually this is something that being a woman, I observe a lot. Some women don't want to have kids because they're well off and they don't, feel the need to, while others, they pay so much money to give birth, to actually, have a child of their own. So I'm just wondering, would it be different? So that is very interesting what you're saying there, Brad. Okay.
It'll definitely be different. And also if you're living to the age of 150,
yes,
and you're 30 now and you're thinking, I'm never going to have a kid, I'm never going to have a child. By the time you reach 70, you may feel very differently about it, right? And if you've got another 70 or 80 years of life expectancy, you may say, let me have a child over the next 20, 30 years and see how that goes.
So technology will help the reproduction of females. Because when you hit 40 or 50, you can't have kids anymore.
Definitely, again, this is all about senescence and cellular reproduction, which, certainly I think within the next 50 years will make incredible strides towards. And then you can freeze your eggs and reimplant them and things like that.
Okay,
Well, I
cool.
mean, you might even consider that by the time we hit that level of technology, you may not even need to biologically carry the baby to term
Correct.
yourself
We
as an
may use what they
individual.
call zygotes, like
Oh
artificial
yeah,
worms.
yeah. Oh, okay, I get it now. Yeah, I remember.
So it's
Okay,
like,
that's
you
great.
decide to have a baby and then you let it grow in some sort of biological, containment unit.
Uh-huh.
And you kind of just, you enjoy yoga and your work and whatever. And then 9 months later, you have a kid. Or
Oh,
you
that
never
would be
know.
great.
The technology might be able to accelerate the development cycle too. So you might decide to say, oh, 3-day delivery, here's your baby. Who knows?
Yeah.
Guys, if I may, right, Brett, just now you touch, a big if, right? All these, if we have the UBI, the universal basic income, right? I hope we do have it, but, just want to ask you, what are really the key things that need to happen, so that majority of people in the world will have UBI?
So let me just frame this by making a statement that will be somewhat controversial for some people. But the concept that our current form of democracy and our current form of economics will survive for thousands of years is ludicrous. Because if you look at the historical development of humanity, that's not what happens. Capitalism is relatively new. Keynesian economics is new. Adam Smith is fairly new historically. You go back 300 years, it was all different. And the same is going to happen with our political systems and so forth. But we're about to undergo some radical changes in terms of the concept of what humanity is and how we should work together, which is going to dramatically shift politics and economics. And that is that climate change and high levels of automation in society, AI-based unemployment and rolling pandemics, because coronavirus is not going to be the last pandemic. These will all create a far more collective sort of pursuit of humanity as a species in terms of evolving and becoming the best we can be as a species. So we'll work much more together. And the current system we have, where you have to argue for those trade-offs between billionaires getting the money and the poor people getting the money, or corporations getting tax breaks and providing healthcare for for the average human, as an example, those will largely disappear because we will understand at the second half of this century, first and foremost, that the number one secret of success for the longevity of humanity as a species and our intelligence is the ability for us to work together collectively. And so the systems we have today are very inefficient at doing that. That's going to be the big conceptual shift. And once we get through that, which climate change and AI automation will sort of force us to do, a UBI won't even be a discussion, because the framing of this will be pretty simple. What's the number one responsibility that a government has to its citizens? And that is to clothe them, to feed them, to make sure they're educated and healthy. And that becomes the first thing you do as an economy. Then you pursue everything else: profitability, engineering, innovation, etc. But first and foremost, you look after citizens and you enable them to reach their full potential.
I just
Can I?
wanted to ask. Oh, sorry, Paul.
No, why don't you go ahead? Because I'm going to throw in a bit of a hand grenade into the conversation.
Okay. I wanted to say, since we're talking about TV programs and everything, one of the TV programs that I just caught up with is Snowpiercer. It's about
It's great.
Yeah, it's about managing, okay, for all the people who are here who might not watched it. It's when it's like basically global warming occurs and it's just cold throughout the whole world, and the only way to survive is to be in this train where it just keeps going. It generates energy and it keeps going forever. And what happens is there's resources, right, that are limited, and then you have the division of class. What's interesting, what Brett said was we will not have that anymore. We will be united as as maybe in this series, say, as one train, right, to go against, a common enemy or whatever. But how do you manage the resources, Brett, where where there is equality?
It's look, this whole issue of equality is been a bane on humanity's existence since the Middle Ages, even before that, right? And it's not necessarily the way we organize resource allocation today is not particularly efficient, and so look at Apple. Apple's an amazing company. But they have $200 billion in cash, and just holding that wealth instead of deploying that to create jobs and create more innovations are, sort of significant issues in terms of the way we use resources. Is it efficient for Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos to have these billions of dollars and hold that wealth rather than deploying that in meaningful ways? So, there are some good questions, but if you look at the outcomes, like let's call it neo-feudalism, right, where essentially, the 1% rule the 99%, they control the wealth, they control resource allocation. That's been the mode of existence for humanity through most of, history, but it's grossly inefficient. And so AI, I think, is where this is all going to change, because particularly for government, when we use AI to do resource allocation, we'll realize the huge gains that come collectively from seeing resource allocation as a problem we have to solve collectively.
So let me throw in some points to, because I think the picture that Brett is painting, or that, the vision that I think a lot of us hope happens, is that, not even just universal basic income, but kind of a more harmonious global society. I think we're both like, Star Trek geeks. United Federation of Planets sounds awesome. We eliminate poverty, we eliminate war. But I think the challenge is, how do we get governments to collaborate when, even if we look at, Thailand, there's still such a big political divide, there's an economic divide. But, I think we're hoping that over the next century, we come together as a human race. Now, the thing that I think that's really quite interesting, if we throw that into the mix, is that, Elon Musk thinks that we'll probably be in a position to colonize Mars before the end of the century. And if that happens, what does the government of Mars looks like? Who claims sovereignty over Mars? Because we're just trying to figure out how to. Yeah, it's like we're already trying to figure out. Sorry, go ahead. Yes?
No. I love this, right? But just want to, we can talk about Mars, in maybe next session or what? Because
no,
because
Thailand. I'm moving.
No, because I am so conscious of time, because Brett can be with us just for another 15 minutes, right? So if you don't mind, I just want to sort of
Having said that, Nietzsche.
Excuse
me? There's one piece of the Mars question which is a very good one for looking at this problem, and that is, if we do colonize Mars, let's say we have 1 million people on the surface of Mars, would we simply replicate the system we have on Earth?
I don't think so, right?
Commerce, capitalism, all that. And the answer is no.
Yeah,
because it would not lead to the optimal outcome for a Martian colony. So
exactly,
we created like a sustainable prosperity doctrine, essentially, to be able to be independent from the Earth. And so it's a good analogy for where we're going.
Sure. And then that's why I like to bring you guys back to sort of like where we left off a bit. Not really Thailand, the whole world, right? Because Brett said that the climate change, the AI-based employment, the temperature, the COVID, and all this stuff will make human work together closer, much closer, which we can already see that, right, Brett? But could you help me or help the audience a bit of how that would reach to the universal basic income? Okay. So Brett, please help us visualize a bit, right? Okay, with all these, human work much closer together, and how we're gonna reach UBI Thank you.
Well, so if we mobilize around climate, for example, okay, climate mitigation is going to create trillions of dollars of economic activity trying to undo the damage we've done to the climate and reinforce our existing systems against climate shift. So, in Thailand, for example, we are going to have to think about how we protect our tourist areas from sea rise. We're going to have to think about in Bangkok how we make the city able to survive 100-year flood type occurrences that are happening every year as the sea rise happens. So,
is there a Bangkok at the end of the century? Given the prediction that Bangkok is literally going to be underwater.
Come on, if Brett,
well, it's actually going to.
Brett, who is the futurist, choose to move to Bangkok, we are safe. Okay.
It's actually going to be easier to protect Bangkok from sea rise than it will be Shanghai or New York, as an example. Right, you can divert water from the Chao Phraya to other areas. You can reinforce the canals and the river walls here. There's a lot you can do that will make it livable with a 1.5 to 2 meter sea rise. Right.
I mean, we're having a hard enough time doing it today during flood season. What happens as the sea levels rise? I mean, I know that there's always technological solutions, but it just gets back down to.
But this is what I mean, Paul. Is this? We have no choice. You're not going to just let Bangkok go under, and so you're going to create this sort of almost multi-generational workforce focused on fixing these problems, and that creates incredible opportunities. So it may be that UBI is attached to some of these things, infrastructure improvement around, making cities, like sea defense as an example, or, sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere and using that to generate carbon nanotubes, which can be used in construction, etc. There's a whole lot of stuff. Retooling the energy system. By 2025, the world's coal plants will it'll be cheaper to replace them, even building entirely new renewable infrastructure, and than it will be to run existing coal plants, even though they've already been built. And so just think about the amount of work we're going to do over the next 20 years, retooling the world's energy systems to be distributed renewable energy with storage capability. I mean, we're talking about huge amounts of effort that's going to be required to sort of retool the world. And that doesn't even get into stuff like health tech and education tech and, fintech and all of those other areas, which will also be going through innovation. So in answer to your question, Nietzsche, there's plenty to do in the 21st century that's going to require us to completely rethink economic development at a national and state level. And this will generate incredible opportunities for the population in terms of workforce that we can attach to the concept of universal basic income. But there's other ways we could do it as well. If you look in Shenzhen at the moment, China is trialing central bank digital currencies. So you can create a secondary monetary supply using central bank digital currencies, but you could, because it's programmable money, you could make it such that when people get the UBI, which is a CBDC, they can only spend it on staples. So they can't use the universal basic income to go out and buy a new iPhone, for example. But they can use it for food, education, healthcare, and housing. And so there are multiple ways we could solve this problem.
Brett, I wanted to ask, what is the priority for Thailand and Southeast Asia right now? In, as you said, a lot can be done. What should the priority be right now?
So can I also reframe? Maybe I might want to reframe that question as well, because I think priority is also like what problems we need to fix. But let me ask you, Brett, because you do think into the far future, and you made the decision to relocate to Bangkok over the long term. So when you look at Thailand and you think about where is Thailand's place in sort of that 21st century, 22nd century economy, what areas do you think that Thailand could really kind of set the tone on, for the global innovation stage? What are kind of the key competitive advantages we have in this country that we ought to be leveraging over the next 100 years?
Let's say work reduces, right? Because that's my firm belief, is that work will reduce. The number of hours we do and the type of work we do is going to change because of automation. And so if that happens, what do you do with your spare time? Well, you're not going to sit on a couch and play VR all the time. You're going to be looking for experiences. Thailand is already very well positioned as an experience economy. And so Thailand needs to really amp up, investment in this experience economy beyond tourism, just into, sort of experience infrastructure. Secondly, Thailand, before the pandemic was near full employment, but we've got to shift away from sort of low skill labor to much more high skilled labor. So there's a re-education, I think, that needs to occur. Thais already value education, I think. So I think that's positive. The healthcare sector here in Thailand, it's already health. We have tourism healthcare, which is incredible growth industry for Thailand. I think healthcare here will be a differentiation in terms of affordability. So the one area probably I would say is just general technology, the startup stuff. We know a lot of this is happening right now, but creating that sort of homegrown technology innovation that can complement those sort of areas of growth.
When you say experience economy, can you elaborate on that? Because it sounds like you're trying to say something beyond just coming to Thailand and experiencing it the way tourists do today. But what is that going to look like?
So I think one of the really interesting things in the future, if you've got a lot more time on your hands, what do? Well, you're going to learn to become a proficient cook. You might learn to be might learn Muay Thai, or you might learn a trade or an art, be an artist or something like that, and spend a couple of years doing that. So these areas of pursuit that you can have outside of your 9-to-5 job that give you joy and happiness, I think that's really what you broadly classify as the experience economy.
I read actually like Thailand, we are strong in part of the agriculture and also the food industry. So in your opinion, what is how can we add more value, or how can we what is the big
improvements in
to improve the agricultural product and also the food industry?
Sure. The big improvements are going to be in two areas, broadly. One is supply chain and one is, overall production methods. We're going to have things like lab-grown meats and lab-grown wine and so forth, because they may be more sustainable. But in terms of agriculture, I think the biggest thing that we can do is, we have technology now like blockchain and so forth that we can use for traceability of the raw materials and so forth in our production. But the efficiency of, just working out better ways to get that food out on the road and to the table essentially is key.
It's interesting because I think this was related to a conversation that we had, you, me, Nietzsche, and then the folks from Krungsi and Rise about food when we're talking about sustainability. And I think one topic that came up was just the amount of food waste that we produce.
About 40% in most developed economies. 40% of food goes to waste in most developed economies, and it actually increased during the pandemic because of hoarding.
Yeah. So I mean, and because I actually I recently did a webinar on food tech, and we actually had the founders of Recult, Freshket, and Let's Plant Meat, as well as the CEO of Taiwa, an agri-food conglomerate. And we were talking about, the future, food tech revolution. And one of the topics we were talking about was global hunger. And the fact that, it's interesting because I think the stats that I was looking up for this webinar is that, 10% of the world's population is hungry or malnourished. but 30% of the world's population is overweight and obese. So it actually turns out that the world is producing way more food to feed everyone and still produce a lot of waste. And so, we're dealing with issues where we're producing too much food. The quality of a lot of the calories is really bad. And we're not even getting good calories or bad calories. The people that aren't getting any calories are too few. And so what winds up is this overproduction just winds up in landfill. And I think you and I were talking about, how do we reduce this food wastage? And we're talking about different ideas like, well, if we can use blockchain to trace the origin of food, why can't we use blockchain to go downstream and trace where the food waste goes? So that you could sit there and say,
one
Go
big
ahead.
change here, Paul, will be vertical farms in cities. So urban greening is going to be a big part of the 21st century, where we'll be putting gardens and food production into cities to reduce the supply chain. But of course, I think it all comes down to AI will solve this problem for us. Maybe it's a bit techno-utopian, but I think AI will be able to look at resource allocation of foods and optimize them, in almost real time.
Well, it's funny because I was actually moderating a room about the future of food the other night, and we're talking about just sort of the idea of farming, like, how has farming evolved and what is, I think the topic of the room is how to make farmers sexy through tech. And, I think, there's a big part of the world that sees farmers as, the people that are kind of sweating outdoors and they're amongst crops, and, they're getting dirty and they're operating farm machinery. And I think to the point that you're making about indoor farms, it's like a lot of these places are very, very, they're soilless, they almost look like, chip labs. Chip fabrication plants, and the farmers of the future could be techies in lab coats.
They're 90% more efficient in terms of water use.
Yeah, and so farms of the future could be highly automated, robotic. The 22nd century farmer could look like an AI programmer. Person wearing kind of a lab suit, iPad doing AI algorithms to determine food allocation. So that would be a very interesting vision of what, potentially a Thai farmer of the 21st century could look like a software engineer, rather than someone who's out in the fields, amongst, rice paddies and whatnot. So that was just a very interesting conversation on the future of food.
Do you think that in 22nd century can we survive on with vitamin pills and water alone? No need to eat the food.
That would be so boring, though.
Because we need to.
Well, I think if you look at augmentation of humanity, I think you will be able to survive for days at a time without food or water. You'll have alternate energy sources, but I don't think we'll want to. Food is one of the things that makes us human, and the food that we eat, the experiences we have around it, getting together with friends, the social aspect. I think I think it's something we'll do because we want to do, not necessarily because we have to do in the future.
Yeah, it'll be more of a cultural thing and experiential. I think it just gets back to the experience economy, that you don't need to eat to live, but you live to eat.
I just wanted to ask something, which was pointed out about how there could be increasing, forms of farming within the urban area. But with COVID-19 coming in, I feel that there is a shift or a change in people. Do you think that there will be a move away from big cities? Do you think that there will be a different way of living and modernizing our country, where it might not be so urban? Right.
It's very interesting because, if you look at the research that was done in the last decade, it indicates that, about 50% of humanity will be living in cities by 2050. But the pandemic has changed that trajectory, working from home and so forth. And I think some employers are going to use that as a competitive differentiation, the fact you don't have to come into the office regularly. And so this is going to change the way we think about, population centers and so forth. But at the same time, we're building essentially this dynamic real-time service layer on top of mobile commerce, and it'll be integrated into smart glasses and AI-based personal assistants and all of this. That does require a certain level of supply chain, efficiency and competency that you won't have in rural areas, but you will have in urban centers. And so, I think it really sort of depends, how much of that you want to get access to, and it'll be a lifestyle choice. But I think you're right. I think there is a chance that more people will say, I don't want to live in cities in the future. And I think that's something that the pandemic, when we look back on that may be one of the longer lasting effects of COVID in terms of, working from home patterns.
I mean, Charat, I think that was such an excellent question, because if you think about the purpose of urban centers and even how urban centers are designed is, they're really designed around the whole idea that, you're conglomerating large numbers of people in one place from 9 till 6 to work. And cities are designed around that, ring roads, highways. It's all designed to actually move people into these city centers to work in the same building for 8-9 hours a day and get them out. And then if you look at, as a result, you've got this BTS system that, moves people in and out quickly. You have real estate that gets super expensive if they're near a BTS station. But what happens when you no longer have to work fixed hours in fixed locations, where work is done digitally and remotely, where you don't have to, go into a city center with a place that has a bunch of food, because you can work from anywhere, from your home, from up country.
Yeah,
you can send in that work at any time of the day, and you can get food delivered by drone.
Yeah, the drone delivery is going to be a huge thing. But Tara, just in just coming back to the whole role of work thing, I think it needs to be said, we don't sort of recognize this because we're in the midst of it, but the 40-hour working week is an anomaly. From a historical perspective, it's only since the Industrial Revolution that we've chosen to work like that. I don't think that's humanity's natural state. And so I think you're right. I think as we change the place work holds in our life, it also may affect the role cities play in our life.
That brings me to my next question as to, like, would your advice for governments or, the people who are constructing these urban areas, because we're seeing, of course, in Bangkok, a big focus on, BTS, as we all see there, a lot of construction in the urban area. Do you think that it needs to be a shift in where we put our money, where we invest our money?
Not yet. I think that will happen as we get to the middle of the century. But for now, one of Thailand's greatest strengths will be the ability to attract talent, high-skilled talent, to Thailand because of the quality of life. So that people will choose to work here because they can work remotely, as an example. To support that growth, you're going to need infrastructure development. So we still need that basic infrastructure development to support that economic growth and that high skill immigration level over the next 20 years before sort of the bigger shifts start to play in.
But the thing I probably would emphasize is that, even as Thailand attracts talent over the next century, it doesn't all necessarily need to conglomerate in Bangkok. As we develop, remote ways of working, as we probably develop cheaper and faster ways of travel between cities, if you look at what Hyperloop is trying to do, once Hyperloop becomes a bit of a reality, you could probably commute from, New York to San Francisco in probably about, 60 to 90 minutes. Which is probably faster than going from Orange County to Los Angeles. And so if that's the case, then, you no longer have to move to Bangkok to work. You can, you could do it from Chiang Mai, you can do it from Phuket. You could take like a 20-minute fast train to Bangkok if you need to meet with people. But, it just becomes more dispersed. You don't need to cram everyone into one city center.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I suggest that, can we give the time to Brett so we can talk
Yeah.
about some of the things he's working on? Because he's got a book coming out, and he's got a television series coming out,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
and we should talk about that.
Interesting.
Brett, please.
We have
So,
any
so
books?
yeah, so Mimi knows me as as a futurist. In much of the world, of course, I'm a fintech guy. I run a fintech radio show. I have a fintech startup. But over the next decade, I'm going to be focused a lot more on general futurism. And so my book Augmented that I wrote in, or it was released in 2015. It did pretty well. It ended up on President Xi's desk, but it's just been optioned for a TV show. So hopefully that'll be on Amazon or Netflix in the next couple of years. We're going to start filming in the second half of the year in New Zealand. Sam Neill has signed on to narrate. Sam Neill's from like Jurassic Park fame. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. But I'm also working. I've just almost finished my 7th book, which is following on from Augmented. It's sort of the sequel, natural sequel to that. It's called The Rise of Technosocialism. And so that really looks at all of these macro changes over the next 30 to 50 years in terms of how humanity will evolve and how our politics and economics and social order will adapt to high levels of automation and climate shift and the sort of crises we have with the pandemic. I've got Arnold Schwarzenegger is doing the foreword for this book, and Jack Ma's made a contribution. So it is a pretty it's a pretty big piece of work. I've been working on it for about 3 years on and off. And that should be out in the summer, at the end of the summer globally. So watch out for that one. In terms of, it's certainly the biggest scope in terms of a book I've ever written. And it really looks at some very, very big issues, such as what is the purpose of humanity? And, how do we support that? So, but I am a techno optimist, and so you will see, as you saw in Augmented, the recurring theme that technology can solve a lot of the biggest problems we have in the world.
I'm going to also add that Brett's got some phenomenal books, but unfortunately he doesn't have a local publisher, so none of his books are in Thai. So I'm just going to say, anyone in the audience, if you have a connection to local publishers that would help translate and publish his books, I think it is a really, really great crime that we don't have his books in the Thai language here. So, but if you don't mind reading English, I highly pick up reading his books.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Brett, for taking your time to be with us here for discussion. Definitely, it's a very exciting time. Kunmimi, do you have any other questions you want to ask?
Not now. Actually, hopefully that we have chance to host episode 2.
Yes, that's going to be my question. Like, when
I'd love to do that. We should do a technosocialism for sure. Yeah, we should do a technosocialism for you guys.
Random question, if I can ask, because I think when Nietzsche and I were at your place for dinner the other week, I saw on your bookshelf Ready Player 2. Did you read that yet?
I'm into it, and I don't want to give any spoilers, but the whole anorak thing, I must say I saw that coming, but more from my watching of the movie than from the reading of the first book. So it's certainly it's definitely pretty cool. It's certainly I'd love to see Spielberg get into the second movie.
Well, no, because if we have you for a minute, because I was going to ask you a question based on your experience economy thing, and I don't want to give it away to anyone who hasn't read Ready Player 2. I hope many of us have actually either read or seen the movie Ready Player 1 that sort of talks about this virtual reality world, but sort of the next generation tech, and this is not going to give away any of the plot, but it sort of involves kind of a next evolution. So it's not just virtual reality, but it's kind of this. It kind of reminds me a lot of what Elon Musk is thinking about in terms of a Neuralink. So actually creating that brain computer interface, and it talks a little bit about being able to not just exist in this virtual reality world, but to actually record your experiences and share those experiences with other people. So if you can think about like not just watching someone's TikTok feed, but actually feeling, watching, experiencing someone else's experience that they've recorded.
If you wanna see an old sci-fi movie that looks at that, there's a movie called Brainstorm in the mid-'80s came out that was postulating on recording that. But there was also a Black Mirror episode on it.
Yeah, that's right. No, but it's interesting because if you're saying that kind of, if Thailand's next sort of, if our competitive advantage maybe in the next century is this experience economy, what happens if this type of technology comes out when you could just share experiences digitally without having to travel to Thailand? And so what I would have loved to, if we had another half hour, was to go into, how realistic is this technology, and does that sort of, wreck the whole thesis behind, tourism or, an experience economy.
Let's get into it next time.
Is it tomorrow?
All right, guys. Hey, listen, it's been really great hanging out with you, and I hope we do this again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time, Brett. It's
Bye, all.
awesome.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we'd just like to say to everyone who's joining our conversation, it's been really insightful. We've touched on a lot of things.
What I want to say is, and I hope this format of conversation was interesting, because I know it's a little bit different than kind of a standard Q&A format, but also not just the style of conversation, but the types of conversations that I typically have with folks like Brett, as well as other people that I deal with in tech, because I think that it's very easy for those of us in startups and VC to try and think about, we think about what life is like today, and we try to fast forward, 5 years, 10 years, and we try to say, okay, what technologies today are going to improve over the next couple of years. But what's slightly different sometimes about the conversations that, Brett and I will have, and kind of the way that I worked with my former VC team, is that we will start from the future and we'll work backwards. So, we spend a lot of time talking about movies like, The Avengers or Minority Report or Blade Runner, and, or Terminator. And, all these films have a very, very different vision of the future, and inevitably the vision of what technology might look like in the future. And we spend a lot of time talking about, is that movie realistic? Can that happen in 50 years? If so, what can we expect from that type of technology? Can we imagine it today? Because, one of the arguments I make, and I did this with my whole VC team, is that a lot of the technologies we operate today were inspired by books and movies from 20, 30 years ago. So, I always like to use the example of the old Star Trek television program from the 60s, because all the technology that they created, that they imagined in the show, actually started to look like the technology of the 80s and 90s. The Motorola flip phones, very similar to the Star Trek communicators. And the reason why is because you had an entire generation of kids that were inspired by movies like that, and said, when I go to college, I'm going to become an engineer, and I'm going to make the same product that I saw on television. And so I tell my teams today, there is going to be an 8-year-old watching The Avengers saying, when I get older, I'm going to build Iron Man armor. And so I tell my team, look at all the coolest science fiction films today and try to imagine which technology some kid will try to make in 10, 20 years. And if you want to kind of try and predict what the future will look like, look at what science fiction is doing today. And so a lot of times our conversations we'll look at, the coolest movies and try and walk backwards and say, what technology should we be thinking about today to create the future that we saw in the movies that we like? And so it's a very different way of thinking, and that's the kind of conversations that we hope. I think what Brett and I wanted to talk about today was just getting people to start thinking, not just about what technology is going to look like for the next 10 years, but what would technology look like 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and then walk it backwards.
Yeah, Paul, I think we have
Mhm.
a great start today,
Mhm.
right? And I think we have discussed a lot of things already. Should we open the mic for some of our audience to make comments or ask questions or discuss some points?
Yeah, if anyone wants to come up and chat, I'm still, I still have energy.
And I'm going to be very controversial when I say this. I was not a Trekkie. I was more like a Star Wars person. But now that, I live in the present, I really see and I really do appreciate Star Trek. And I do see now that I find more interest in the latest Star Trek series because it is true now. All the things that we're seeing happening is coming from these kind of programs. Hmm.
No, no, but I mean, even beyond Star Trek, one of my favorite movies is Minority Report because I think
Hmm.
it does such a good job of imagining what our near future might look like. Even though the film is almost 20 years old, it still feels realistically futuristic. And I think up until maybe 2 weeks ago, Nichapat had never seen the movie, and so I actually had her sit down and watch it. I don't know what your impressions were after you saw the movie.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's been a
I
while.
think for me it's
Hmm.
interesting, right? But I'm not sure I am going to arrest anyone before they made that crime. I
Oh,
Well,
yeah. Oh, I
probably,
remember
maybe
it now. I remember it now.
yes,
Okay.
no, no, but again,
Yeah.
it's not
Then.
even just the idea of predicting future crime, but if you saw the vision of autonomous vehicles
yeah,
Uh-huh.
and
I love that.
advertising
Yeah.
and biometrics and drones,
Uh-huh.
it's like that. You look at it today, and it's like that could all happen,
Okay, we
and it
have,
doesn't seem like it's
yeah,
that far
we
off.
we have Kun Surawat naha that has just
Sam,
come in too.
Hello,
Hi,
So
sawasdee
hi
let's
krap,
guys.
join the
Big Sam.
conversation.
Hi, Waddy Cop.
Hello.
Um, so sorry I joined the call or the talk a little bit late, so I'm not sure if this was mentioned, but did Brett or anyone talk about the sort of the core reason or thought process for why we believe that UBI will be possible in the future?
That's
yeah,
what
I mean,
I'm trying to get it from him.
Oh,
But
okay.
like the conversation is we're just so excited, right? But I think the key thing is that what he's trying to say is that because of the climate change, because of the temperature rising, AI based employment will reduce the work, and then because of the COVID as well, right? These all things make human want to work much more closer together or force us to work together, and then the good thing will happen, and then the tax we'll be able to tax what we should be taxed, and because of that UBI is possible. But frankly speaking,
it's a
Pisam,
bit of a leap.
I was trying to push, I'm not push, right? I mean, I'm trying to sort of like unearth that thought of his quite a bit, but the conversation just going sideways for so many times, so I was like, okay, next session.
Okay,
Yeah, no,
understood.
I think there were a couple of big leaps, which I think because the time with him was limited, but I think
Mm,
the thinking was that UBI will come. So I think he was saying that because of all the big climate disasters that are in front of us, that the world out of necessity will start to be a little bit more collaborative. And then I think, as that sort of collaboration builds, then I think culturally, I think there's going to be a recognition that between fixing a collective problem around climate and dealing with a collective problem of AI driven, automation driven unemployment, that maybe humans will kind of make that leap and see that UBI is necessary. I think we might have skipped some steps, or maybe Brett did, and we didn't get to dive into that. But I think that was the implication, is that UBI will be a result of the world sort of coming together because of collaborating around climate and unemployment and
I see.
automation.
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
I'd love
oh,
to learn. Oh, go ahead. So please go ahead.
oh, I'm so sorry. I don't want to be the party pooper, as as a slang word say, but we're kind of running out of time. Okay, so Kun Paul, would you like to give your last thoughts on today's talk?
No, I'm just happy that people popped in. Again, the types of conversations that happen tonight is the type of conversations that we have with Brett when we sit down with him over a burger or beer. We just let our imaginations run wild and we try to imagine possibilities, and then we argue and debate, and then we, that's part of what I think trying to imagine innovation and disruption should be like. It's basically, poking and prodding, alternate visions of the future.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. We are very excited. And Kunimi and the Techsauce team are already talking about future talks in this style. Kunyutapat, thank you so much for being with us and helping us out as well with a touch summarization of the
ได้
whole
เลยค่ะ
talk. ขอบคุณมากค่ะ แล้วคุณสุรวรรณนะคะ thank you so much as well for raising your hand and joining us towards
Thank
the
you.
end.
Thank you too.
And thank you for hosting this room.
Yeah, Kunimi, any last thoughts?
Hopefully that we have chance to host the episode 2. Actually, I have many questions that related to, like, for example, like travel tech and the future of the travel. For example, like I have seen like Doraemon, the cartoon and Japanese cartoon that we love. We have seen the Anywhere door, and hopefully that we can see it in the next century.
Okay, ค่ะ Thank you,
Can I
everybody. ค่ะ
also ask everyone in the room to just click on the little green house on the top if you haven't followed the Techsauce Club. Follow the Techsauce Club, and I'm also going to do a promo for a club I just worked on called Thailand Tech Chat. So that's more of an English language focus, but we're always happy to collaborate with Techsauce in creating multilingual content. So please follow Techsauce and please follow Thailand Tech Chat.
Thailand Tech Chat.
Yes.
Paul,
Tech Chat.
where can I find Thailand Tech Chat? Do I have
I
to
think
search for it?
if you do a search for the club Thailand Tech Chat, it's not in this one because this room is hosted by Techsauce.
Got it.
But Thailand Tech Chat, we're going to
Oh,
be doing
see that. Yep. Okay.
all sorts of fun content as well. But probably for the benefit of our non-Thai speaking ecosystem fans.
Okay,
And then
thank you.
and then for your Thailand Tech Chat, do you have like specific session like once a
Yeah.
week
So
or what?
actually,
I know I'm your wife, but I don't
yes,
know.
you already know that, so you're helping me promo. So actually, and actually, I think the co-founder Lily is down in the audience. We're going to be doing a weekly, it's called Thai Tech Weekly, which is just kind of a review of some of the major tech events going on that might impact Thailand. That will happen every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Although there's actually some interest from folks, especially the Thai Americans in California, that are asking, is there going to be another set of rooms at a later time when they don't have to wake up at 5 in the morning? And then I think Lily and I and our co-founder Dave, we're also looking to come up with other topics that we can do on the other nights. So, just different
Okay.
topical things. So
Okay.
that's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. ขอบคุณนะคะทุกคน and
Thank
we
you.
look forward for further collaborations. Okay, we'll have to end it now.
Oh,
Good
no.
morning to all those who are listening to us from the States, and good night to everyone who's listening to us here in Thailand นะคะ สวัสดีนะคะ
สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดี
สวัสดี
ค่ะ
ค่ะ
สวัสดีครับสวัสดีครับ
Techsauce, sparking innovative thoughts.